Hello everyone, this is the follow-up video to part 43 in this rating run series. I've decided in the recent videos to split up the game being played and the game review. So you can check out the previous video to see the actual game being played and me explaining the moves as I play. So now I'm going to do a game review. So let's see what we can learn, what we could have done better in that game. All right, so it looks like the game went 42 moves, and it ended up being a draw. So let's take a look at what happened. We started out with e4, and so I had the white pieces. I played against my opponent here, who was 1474 rated. All right. A lot of viewers have asked about what to do in an opening when you don't know that opening, you're unfamiliar with it. So I played an opening that I don't normally play, and I tried to follow basic opening principles. So that's one of the best things you can do if you're unfamiliar in an opening. You also want to look at your king, your pieces, and your pawns. Make sure there aren't any surprise checks or captures, any tactics that will throw the game off or, lose the game. All right, so in the opening, you want to try and get both your center pawns out if you can, 2 squares forward. That way they don't block in your bishops, and they give your bishops and queen room to move. So I played e4. In the opening, if you play e4, the game usually tends to open up more, and there'll be more tactics involved because there'll be more pieces, more room for your pieces to maneuver because the pawns usually get traded off in the center. Whereas if you play d4, there's more of a chance that the center of the board will be kind of locked up more, and the game will be more complicated, more strategic, and you'll have to maneuver around the center. So e4, my opponent plays e5, one of the best moves to respond, to keep the center even. We're both controlling squares in the center and gaining space. And now knight to f3. So in the opening, you want to develop your knights first, usually, because they're slower than your bishops. So try and get your pawns out, into the center. Develop knights before bishops because it takes them longer to move across the board. And it's almost always good to put your knights on f3 and c3 because they control a lot of valuable squares in the center. And I'm attacking here. And by developing this knight, it gets me closer to castling kingside. And that's one of your goals in any opening, is to get your pieces developed quickly and get your king safe as quickly as possible. All right, so my opponent responds by protecting the piece here. And you always want to try and pick moves that do more than one thing. So this move develops a piece off the back rank toward the center, so it also controls squares in the center, and it protects an attacked piece. All right, so here I played the Scotch game, which I'm not as familiar with that. I pushed forward, following the rule of basic opening principles to try and control the center and put both of your pawns in the center, 2 squares. Now, you won't always be able to do that to get both pawns pushed forward in the center. Sometimes maybe you'll have your C and D pawns pushed forward. But if your opponent lets you, it's usually a good idea to put your D and E pawns out in the center, and even the C pawn maybe, and have 3 pawns in the center. So, continuing on, he captures, which that's a good move because if your opponent's trying to grab all that space with 2 pawns in the center, it's usually a good idea to get rid of that pawn. And now to keep the game even, I captured. Now normally in the opening, you don't want to move a piece twice in the opening, but that pawn moved twice, so then my knight moved twice to keep the game even. the material even. So that's excusable when you're recapturing a piece. All right, so now my opponent continues development here, attacking this pawn. And here I wasn't sure what the best move was, and it looks like I kind of accidentally picked the best move by capturing his knight. So once again, you don't want to move a piece twice in the opening, but I was worried here that this pawn is unprotected. If I jump this knight up here, I was thinking, well, he could possibly just attack right here. Or excuse me, if I jump my knight up here, the bishop could come out and attack my knight, which would be pinned to the king. So then I was just kind of worried about the safety of this pawn here. So anyway, I played knight captures, breaking the rule of moving a piece twice in the opening, but it forced my opponent to break his pawns apart, so he had a little bit of a weakness here. Now, when you capture with a pawn like this, he could have captured with the D pawn or the B pawn. It's usually better to capture towards the center because it takes a less valuable pawn and moves it closer to the center where it's guarding and attacking a more valuable square here, this D5 square. So now you have just another pawn that's helping control the center of the board. Okay, so moving on, I continue with my plan, developing the bishop because I was worried about my knight being pinned up here. So, and maybe I didn't play the best moves here. If we go back, they recommend E5, which is interesting, just attacking the knight here. And then E7, which would pin the pawn to my king. And then I would have to play E2. And so then the knight would be forced to move and jump to D5. So that's one way the game could have played out, if I push this pawn forward. But instead, I didn't know how to play the opening, so I wanted to just develop a piece and follow opening principles. But by developing here, this bishop is kind of passive, blocked in by its own pawn in the center. This is a bad bishop, and a bad bishop is just when one of your bishops is blocked by pawns that are on the same color squares that the bishop occupies. But I am ready to castle, and the game is still about even, although maybe slightly in black's favor here. So it says D5 or G6 are the best moves, but the opponent played bishop to C5, which now the computer says that this is a mistake. So, that's interesting. This move is a mistake that I didn't take advantage of, obviously. And let's see here. It says that from here I should have played E5 and attacked that knight. And then if the knight moved, follow it up with queen to G4 here, attacking this unprotected pawn. So that's interesting. All right, but I missed out on that, and I played just castling. So another theme, when you're unfamiliar with an opening, just follow general principles, develop your pieces, get your king castled to safety. And for those of you, the beginners that think, well, isn't my king trapped here in the corner? But if you leave the king in the middle, it can be attacked from left, right, or head on. But now that it's in the corner, it can only be attacked from head on and from one side. So it limits the possible attacks that your opponent could have on the king. And the pawns kind of barricade the king in and help protect it. All right, So my opponent plays d6, which is an excellent move, although it preferred an immediate d5 here. All right, so now h3 I played to prevent this bishop from coming down, or the knight, just to try and limit the scope of the bishop. And it says that's an excellent move, but just developing the bishop here, or excuse me, the knight here to c3 would have been better. And my opponent castles to safety. Now I do develop the knight, and it says this is an excellent move, but now it is saying that I should have developed the bishop instead, pinning it to the queen. So, that's an interesting possibility there. Maybe I could pin that knight, then jump my queen up here and threaten to capture. And then if the queen captures, I could recapture and break apart his kingside pawn. So that was a little possibility that I didn't, that I overlooked. All right, so bishop to e6. This develops a piece, but the computer says this is an inaccuracy and that knight to d7 would have been better. From knight to d7, the knight could jump down here and attack my bishop, I suppose. All right. So now I respond with rook to e1, which is good, although it looks like king to h1 was preferred by the computer. All right, so moving on, the queen forms a battery here of bishop and queen, maybe threatening to capture and break open my king side, although once again the computer prefers knight to d7. And now, this says that white is ahead by plus 1.2 here, so interesting. It's saying that I should go knight to a4 and attack this bishop, but instead I just developed here, and yeah, I do see why this would have been better, to put immediate pressure on that bishop. Now the bishop could have retreated, and then if I captured, it would pull this isolated pawn into the center here, or he could undouble these pawns. So anyway, moving on. We had an exchange. I captured with the rook, which prevented me from doubling my pawns up and causing weak pawns here. So now I can also move this rook maybe over here, attack the king side, and I'm protecting this h3 pawn. So now black develops a rook here. And if you're going to develop your rooks, it's usually good to put them on half open files like this B file or the E file, or put them behind pawns that have been pushed forward or that you plan to push forward, because they'll back up those pawns and you can use those pawns as a battering ram. All right, so moving on. I develop my queen, which gives me room to move this rook and develop that next. And I make my own battery here, maybe threatening to attack this bishop. So g6 is played, and it says that's excellent, but d5 is the preferred move here, threatening if I don't capture, and even if I do capture, pushing pawns and threatening to fork my knight and rook here. So I move my knight away. Now if they push, I can jump up here and attack the queen and bishop, maybe exchange off my knight for his bishop. And he does the same thing, threatening to jump over here. So that was interesting in the game. And let's see here. I played rook to f3, and it says that that is an inaccuracy. So better would have been queen to d2. Just moving over here, lining up on this. Yeah, I guess that would also prevent the knight from jumping in here. Oh, and possibly, maybe at some point I could try and take advantage of these weak squares. Anytime your opponent has fianchettoed here, push this pawn here, and the bishop is not able to jump in there and cover these squares, that can be a weakness that you may be able to take advantage of. All right, so he moves forward here, which is a mistake. That said that f5 would have been better, trying to trade this less valuable f pawn for the more valuable e pawn, the center pawn. But my opponent didn't play that. I pushed this, which is a good move, but queen to d2 would have been better. And then now my opponent moves his queen, but once again, f5 is the preferred move. If you can use one of your side pawns to trade for a more valuable central pawn, that's usually a good idea to do that. So I try the same thing. I push forward here. That way, if a center pawn moves, I'll be able to capture it with a less valuable pawn. But it says that queen to e1 would have been a better move here. So, that's interesting that it preferred that. What can I do with a queen down here? Maybe move over here with check, try and control the center from c3, or even move further. That way, if the pawn pushes, I could capture the queen. All right. So queen to g5, the best move, and black found it. Threatening to, it's pinning this pawn here. Now, if my rook moves, then the bishop would be able to capture if this rook wasn't here. So that's something to watch out for. Whenever the queen lines up on your king, look for threats. But this move, more importantly, will threaten to push the knight maybe to here. Although, if the knight did that, I could go here and the knight wouldn't be able to move because then the queen would be under attack. So anyway, moving on, I decided to attack the queen, and it says that better would have been queen to b2 check. Yeah, probably better to keep the queen on the board. But I don't know, I was feeling a little bit of pressure with his pieces slowly moving over to my king side. So we trade queens. I capture with the rook so I don't bust apart my pawns. And then we have knight to f4 attacking my bishop. And so here I decide to keep my bishop by retreating. And now my opponent decides to push in the center finally. All right, I don't know if it's getting dark in here. I'm going to turn on a light. All right, hopefully that doesn't create so much glare that it's hard to see me. But continuing on, I capture with my central pawn. Normally you want to capture with your pawn from the side, but I figured he would capture and then I'd capture. But I don't know, maybe here I shouldn't have captured again because it kind of opened the position up more for black. So it said that that move was good, but it would have been better to immediately attack the bishop. So that's interesting. If we go back, well, I won't go over that because this move is still good here. But now the knight captures, and it looks like a rook capture would have been better, but he's attacking my rook. So I'm forced to move. I retreat back, but it says rook to e5 would have been a better move. So that's interesting. Maybe trying to get him to push a pawn. Well, he wouldn't be able to push the pawn because then I'd take his bishop. So maybe it wanted me to move here and then double the rooks up. All right, so now the knight moves more further down into my position, and I go here to prevent the knight from forking. So back here, the threat was him moving to c2 and forking both my rooks. So I stop that, and then he responds with c6, which is the best move, protecting this pawn. And so now I played a3, which is good, but it preferred c5, immediately attacking the bishop here. So now we have this retreat, and So here, I captured that knight, I believe. But it would probably be better to... Well, no. We'll see what the computer says. So it says this is an excellent move, but maybe rook to c3 would have been better, attacking the knight and protecting this pawn. Okay. So now we have a recapture. Now I'm forced to push forward, although it says I should have just captured right away. And now we have this protected bishop, or excuse me, the bishop protecting the pawn, which was the best move, and the game is even. So knight to c3 attacking. I wondered if it was better to push up here to c5, but it prefers the attack of the bishop. And so now he moves his rook to the open file, which is a good move, an excellent move. But bishop to b3 would have been better, keeping his bishop. So I exchange off pieces, but now he has this passed pawn in the center, although it is isolated. And I have two pawns that are connected here, and one of them should try to break through. And that's another strategy in the end game, or in most of the game. If you have one pawn against two and you don't know what to do, a lot of times it's good to push the unopposed pawn forward first, and then try and move the other pawn up, and eventually you can exchange off this unopposed pawn with the pawn of your opponents and have one left over to try and push and promote if you can. All right, so I attack, and it said that was excellent, although rook to d1 would have been a little bit better. Okay, yeah, that makes sense, because then if we trade off, I'm attacking his isolated pawn. Okay, anyway, he plays rook to e2, and it looks like a pawn push would have been better, because now I'm just able to capture, which was the best move. And now the opponent piles up here, threatening to capture my f pawn. And here I played rook to f1, which was best, because I do not want both of these rooks wreaking havoc, just gobbling up all my pawns and checking me. So I had to stop that. And now he pushes forward, the best move. If you have a passed pawn, it's usually best to just push it forward and try to promote. So I move forward. Although it says rook to d7 immediately is the best move here. All right, so rook to b2, the best move. I play rook to d7 the best, because if there's a passed pawn, you need to stop it as quick as you can before it becomes a problem as it marches up the board. All right, so capture, both the best moves, and rook to a5 is the best, attacking my unprotected pawn. So I move in behind it, the best move, and he just pushes a pawn forward. Although it prefers rook to f5, which would once again put pressure on this f pawn. So I push here just to slow down his pawns, and now he makes this move, which is the best. And so I have to protect the best move here, and he gets behind the passed pawn. So whenever there's a passed pawn, yours or your opponent's, it's usually good to get behind it, where it's best to attack an enemy's passed pawn from behind, and it's best to put your rook behind a passed pawn to help push it forward. And as it moves up the board and becomes stronger and stronger, it's easy to guard it from behind. All right, so I push forward here to be protected by my rook, which was the best move. And then my opponent moves here to stop this pawn and blockade it. And now 2 against 1, my passed pawn will fall. So I push here, which the computer says is the best move, giving my king some breathing room and protecting this pawn. And now rook captures, the best move, I capture, which is best, and then a recapture. And so here, I move out, and my opponent offered a draw, which I accepted. So, an interesting game. Let's take a look at the game review and see what it says here. So, I'll take that. Played at a 2150 level versus 2100. It said you had a pretty competitive game there. You played a bit better than your opponent in the opening. It was an incredible middle game by both of you. Both of you played with incredible precision in the end game. So it looks like we both played pretty good in that one. All right, so 96% accuracy in the opening versus 90.8. 89.5 in the middle game versus 88, and 99 in the end game versus 99. Oh my gosh. All right. And if we go up here, it looks like, oh man, we both played over 90% accuracy. So 93.5 versus 92.4. So, my opponent definitely played above a 1400 level, so I don't know what their real rating is. Okay, well, mistakes, inaccuracies. It looks like neither of us made any blunder or had any misses, although my opponent made 3 mistakes, which I guess I was not able to capitalize on. So, inaccuracies, I played 4. And they played 1, so obviously 3 of those probably did not take advantage of his small mistakes. And no brilliant or great moves, but I'm comfortable with that game. You always would like to win, but sometimes the game will just end up in a draw. And I was playing an opening that I was not familiar with, the Scotch game. All right, well, before the video drags on too long, I hope you enjoyed this game review. Feel free to leave comments or suggestions, whatever you think. If you think I should have gone in depth into lines more, maybe. And if you like the video, please like and subscribe. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.